Investing in Cairo's real estate can build you wealth or it could cost you dearly. I've been living here now for nearly 2 years and I've seen people really make it and really lose it. And why? Just simply understanding how to navigate the landscape here could potentially set you up for millions. This isn't investment advice, but these are tips on helping you navigate how to invest here in New Cairo. Let's get into it. Hi, my name is Saif. My mission is to help you move to Egypt and to start a life on your own terms. Maybe even here in the desert, who knows? This video is particularly helping you navigate how to invest here in Egypt. It's something that many think about, especially if they're deciding on Egypt being something mid to long term for you and your family. So the first thing is making sure you buy into a place where the developer can no longer build out from. What do I mean by this? I want to compare two compounds, Medinity being one and Rehab being the other. Medinity is a compound that can accommodate 900,000 people. But what you probably don't notice on the map of Medinity immediately is the fact that there is an abundance of space around Medinity. And that means that the developer TMG can always be building out because they can just buy up the land and therefore increase supply of the particular product. That means that when it comes to demand itself, there'll always be a limited amount of demand versus supply. There's always going to be an abundance of supply versus demand. And that will mean that your investment doesn't retain a good price because people just have so many options. When you compare that with Rehab, which is a compound that accommodates around 400,000 people and has limited space around it now because all the area is built up, there's always going to be an excess of demand versus supply, simply because there's just nowhere to build anymore. And that means that if you're investing, you want to be investing into areas where there's already that kind of fixed space so that the actual price retention and value remains, if not increases over time, because there's simply no other options for people. That's the first thing to do when it comes to investing in New Cairo. Moving on to point number two. Point number two is the fact that many properties here can be bought on a payment plan. So a lot of these developers are trying to entice you to buy a property by telling you, oh, you can pay monthly for the next 10 years and only pay 2%, or in some cases, you don't even have to put anything down. And you might think that's a great deal, but what you're not recognizing is that they are baking in a significant markup by just offering that payment plan. And that payment plan is a modern version, or almost like a Muslim or Islamic version of a trap. And most of these deals aren't actually even Islamic. You'll find yourself taking out these payment plans for apartments that you probably can't afford, that cost well over the price of what they should be costing, and then simply trapping you for the next 5 to 10 years and you can't get out. A lot of people argue, well, the inflation's baked in or the price appreciation is baked in. And therefore, over the next few years, even if you're on a payment plan, because the economy and the property is appreciating, you're actually ending up with a good deal. But you will find so many examples of people buying properties on payment plans and they're struggling to get their return on investment or just break even on their investment because they've not factored the fact that there's an abundance of supply in New Cairo. So that's something, don't get roped into a payment plan. What I would do is this instead, which is go into Property Finder and find deals that are pre-2020 if you can. Why this is so? Because after 2020, in particular after COVID, the price of properties here in New Cairo almost went up 4 times because the economy collapsed, the particular currency collapsed. And that meant that prices just overnight became 3 and 4 times more than what they should have. When you're buying something on an old contract, you're getting old contract prices. Therefore, you're buying something for the price of maybe 50 to 100K versus 250 to 300K right now because it's something from 5 years ago. And therefore, you're getting better value for money and you'll know that your investment will have a better return just simply because you're a bit smarter. And then you can trade that if you want. You're paying a fairer price for something that's already in the market. And let me give you an example. The developer TMG have a particular compound called Noor Compound. They offer properties right now in Noor Compound, as well as Medina and other compounds right now, let's say for 250K. Yet they offer as well on Property Finder, if you type in 2020 and 2020 contract, the same 2 to 3 bedroom apartment for 100K, just because you're buying it from a reseller versus directly from the developer right now. You're buying it on an all contract, all money situation, and therefore you're able to get simply the same thing for less than half the price. That's what I would do. don't get tied into multiple year contracts, payment plan contracts, because they're setting you up for failure. I also think it's quite un-Islamic, and just simply trading a bit of knowledge, taking a bit of time out and rebuying from a reseller is what's going to set you up for success. Right, moving on to point number 3. And the final thing is just getting too emotional about investing. A lot of people here buy into a property, an apartment, a villa, simply because of the developer's name, thinking that the developer's name alone is going to make it a great investment. Let me give you the example of Emar, who are here in Egypt. They have 3 compounds, Mavida, Uptown, and a new compound that's being developed in the new side of Cairo, closer to the new capital. Most people who are buying into Emar are doing so because they've seen it in Dubai, they've seen it across the Middle East, and thinking that they're going to see the same types of returns, or believing that the investment, simply because of the Emar name, is going to be a great one. But what happens over time is they end up struggling to sell the property because it's way too overpriced, or they just realize that the market doesn't exist for the rental side of things. The example is with Mavida. If you go to Mavida as a compound, it looks amazing, it has an incredible waterway, the villas are really nice, the apartments seem really lush, but when you actually look around, you recognize there aren't many people living there. And that's because right now, I believe the generation that can afford to live there is very limited. The percentage of people who can't afford to pay $1,000 plus to be living in Emar compounds are very few. And that means that if you're investing here because you want to see a return, it simply won't just be a guaranteed case because of the reputation and name. What I would do instead is think about, what is the reason for me buying that particular investment? Am I doing so for my family? Or am I doing so because I want to see a return? If it's a return, you might want to trust more investors. You might want to trust realtors, or those that have simply developed compounds where there is simply a high demand because of the particular area. The catchment area around Rehab seems to have a great influx of people looking for apartments, looking to buy places, and there seems to be an increased demand because of that. So make sure you think about the elements of why you are buying a property here, and not just thinking about the emotional reason or the pull of that particular developer. Another thing that you need to be thinking about when it comes to investing here, if you're doing so for your family's sake, is think about the timeline of how long you'll be here with your family. An example is some families here move with the idea of being in Egypt for 3 to 4 years. They want their children to learn Arabic, get to a proficient level, maybe learn some Quran, and they are then moving back to the UK or the US for the higher school education. If that is the case, you want to be thinking, what is a great place for now, because you want to be comfortable, but you want to be thinking about in 3 to 4 years, is this area going to be seeing a compound that outpaces the particular areas around it? And an example of that is the golden triangle, the golden square even, of New Cairo, where people are investing in that particular area because they recognize in 4 years' time, it's going to be closer to the new capital, which will be more populated. And therefore, because all the jobs are moving there, there'll be increased demand for properties in the Golden Square. And therefore, in 4 years' time, it's going to be a better investment. These are all things to factor and consider if you're thinking about buying in New Cairo. What I would do, though, before thinking about doing any of that, is make sure you've experienced the particular economy and the culture for at least a year. It's advice my mum gave me after learning the hard way about investments in America. Actually stay there, understand how the culture works, the best areas for yourself, so you can make an informed decision when it comes to putting your money down. Hopefully you found these tips useful, and I'll catch you in the next one.